A queen filled a wineskin with human blood and went hunting through a field of corpses for one particular head to push into it. The head she wanted belonged to the most powerful man who had ever lived, the founder of an empire that ran from the edge of India to the shores of the Aegean, a king his own people called their father and the Greeks who feared him still called great. Herodotus says she found the body, forced the head down into the blood, and told the dead man she would finally give him his fill of it. This is the story of how a child left on a mountain to die built the world's first empire, and then ruled it by a method almost no conqueror had ever tried. He let the people he beat keep their gods, their kings, and their names. 25 centuries later, we are still arguing about whether that made him history's first humanitarian, or just its cleverest tyrant. Every conqueror collects a birth legend. Cyrus's is worth telling for one strange reason. The Persians who loved him and the Greeks who feared him told almost the same one. Herodotus says his grandfather was Astyages, king of the Medes, who dreamed his daughter's son would take his throne. So he married her off beneath her, and when she bore a boy anyway, he handed the baby to his most trusted man, Harpagus, with an order to kill it. Harpagus could not do it himself. He passed the job to a herdsman, whose wife had just born a stillborn child. They swapped the babies, laid their own dead son on the mountain in his place, and raised the future king of the world in a cattle herder's hut. The boy gave himself away by being impossible to command. Playing at kings with the village children, he had a nobleman's son whipped for disobeying him, and that, in a herdsman's boy, is what betrayed him to the king who had once ordered him dead. Astyages spared the boy. Against the man who had failed to kill him, he took a revenge so monstrous it decided the fate of the empire. He had Harpagus's son killed and served the father his own child's flesh at a banquet, then showed him the head. Harpagus did not rage. He said the king's will was good, gathered up what was left of his son, and went home to wait. Years later, with Cyrus grown, Harpagus hid a letter urging revolt inside the belly of a hunted hare and sent it to the prince disguised as game. The plan: raise the Persians, and the Median nobles would change sides on the battlefield. Cyrus convinced his clans with a lesson instead of a speech. One day he made them clear a field of thorns by hand under the sun. The next, he feasted them on wine and roasted meat and asked which life they preferred. The thorns, he told them, were life under the Medes. The feast was freedom under him, and the only thing between the two was whether they would fight. They fought. Harpagus defected as promised, and the Median Empire fell in a single campaign. Now every throne in the region had a problem named Cyrus, and the richest of them decided to do something about it, walking straight into the most famous trap in ancient history. Croesus of Lydia, a king so wealthy his name still means it, tested the oracles before he moved, asking each what he was doing on a certain day. Only Delphi answered correctly: a tortoise and a lamb boiling together in a bronze pot, exactly the strange meal he had cooked in secret. So he trusted it, and asked the question that mattered: should he march on Persia? If he did, Delphi said, he would destroy a great empire. He heard what he wanted and marched. The empire he destroyed was his own. Cyrus beat him, besieged, and took his capital at Sardis, and all the gold of Lydia passed to Persia. Years before, the Athenian Solon had warned Chryses to count no man happy until his life was safely over, because fortune turns. On the day his city fell, he remembered, too late. Only one prize on earth outshone what Cyrus already held, and the way he took it is the moment that separates him from every conqueror before him. Babylon was the oldest and grandest city in the world, ringed by walls so wide the Greeks swore a chariot could turn on top of them. A direct assault was hopeless. So Cyrus looked at the one thing its builders had never thought to defend. The river Euphrates ran straight through the city, in under the walls. And a river can be moved. His men dug channels that drained the Euphrates into a marsh until the water dropped to the height of a man's thigh. Then his soldiers simply walked up the emptied riverbed, under the water gates, into the city, on a night Babylon was holding a festival. Herodotus says, the place was so vast that the people dancing in the center had not yet heard that the edges of their own city had already fallen. The greatest city in the world was taken by men most of its citizens never saw coming. What Cyrus did next is the reason we still talk about him. He did not raise Babylon, did not deport its people, did not smash its gods. He walked in as a liberator restoring order, honored the Babylonian god Marduk, and let the city keep its life. A clay barrel covered in his proclamation survives, the object now called the Cyrus cylinder, in which the king announces that he has freed captive peoples and sent them home to rebuild their temples. Among those captives, the Hebrew Bible says, were the Jews of the Babylonian exile, and the books of Ezra and Isaiah remember Cyrus by name as the foreign king who sent them home to rebuild Jerusalem, the only non-Jewish ruler in all of Scripture called an anointed one, a conqueror the people he conquered thanked. To understand why he did it, you have to stop thinking of it as mercy. This is the part that is easy to get backwards. It is tempting to read Cyrus's tolerance as kindness, but it looks more like strategy. Every empire before his tended to rule conquered peoples by breaking them, deporting populations, stamping out their gods, holding them down under the threat of the next massacre. That is expensive, and it breeds the next revolt. Cyrus seems to have tried the opposite bargain. Keep your god, keep your customs, keep your local rulers, pay your taxes, send your soldiers, and Persia will leave the rest alone. A people allowed to stay themselves has far less reason to rebel, and an empire that does not have to garrison every hatred can grow far larger than one that does. On that approach, Cyrus and his heirs built the first true superpower. From the Indus to the Aegean and down into Egypt, dozens of nations under one crown, held together less by fear than by administration, with governors called satraps, standardized systems, and a royal road that could carry an order from the center to the rim without it breaking on the way. You have probably heard the Cyrus cylinder called the world's first charter of human rights. There is even a replica at the United Nations, and it is not quite true, which makes the real story better. That reading flatters Cyrus more than the evidence allows. He was an empire builder who freed some peoples because it served his rule, not a modern liberal drafting universal freedoms. The cylinder itself is a traditional Babylonian royal proclamation, not a Bill of Rights. But the honest version is rarer and more interesting than the myth. 25 centuries ago, one man discovered that you could govern difference instead of erasing it, that you did not have to break a people to keep them, and he proved, at a scale no one had reached before, that it would actually hold. That is not a charter. It is something a conqueror is far less likely to leave behind. A working idea about how to be merciful on purpose. For all of that, the man who built an empire on knowing when to stop killing could not find his own stopping point. Northeast of his empire lay the open steppe and its nomads, beyond the reach of any settled power. Cyrus went after them anyway. They were ruled by a widowed warrior queen named Tyrant, and he first tried to take her land the easy way, by proposing marriage. She saw straight through it, told him to be content ruling his own people, and let her rule hers. It was his own philosophy handed back to him as a warning, and he ignored it. He crossed the river and won the first round with a trick. He left a camp full of wine for the nomads, who were not used to it, then fell on them while they lay senseless. The queen's son was taken, and when he woke and understood how he had been beaten, he killed himself from shame. And Tyrant sent Cyrus the message that gives this story its shape. Give me back my son and leave, or I swear by the sun I will give you your fill of blood. He did not turn back. The last battle, Herodotus says, was the fiercest ever fought between such peoples, and this time no trick saved him. The Persians were broken, the greater part of the army destroyed on the field, and Cyrus the Great, king of the four corners of the world, was killed among the dead, after a reign of nearly 30 years. Then came the wineskin. The queen searched the field for his body, lowered his head into the blood she had carried for exactly this, and told the insatiable man that she had given him, at last, the blood he could never get enough of. Whether it happened that way or not, it is how the ancient world chose to mark the one limit it believed even Cyrus had. His body was carried home to a plain stone tomb at Pasargadae, on the plain where he had first beaten the Medes. It still stands. 200 years later, a Macedonian boy who had grown up reading about Cyrus pulled his empire down and took it for himself, and when Alexander found Cyrus's grave broken open and robbed, he ordered it restored, one conqueror honoring another across the ruin of the thing they had both wanted. The empire faded. The man outlasted it. The Persians called him father, the Jews called him anointed, and the Greeks who fought his descendants for generations could never bring themselves to call him anything but great. He built the largest thing in the world by understanding that power is cheaper when it is gentle. And he died the moment he forgot his own lesson. At the one border he should have left alone. Whether that makes him history's first humanitarian or its cleverest tyrant is the argument he left us. 25 centuries on, both sides are still right.